This is an Arduino UNO. If you ever even begun to look into making LEDs blink and motors spin, the UNO is probably one of the first things you found. The UNO was first released in 2010 and changed the world of making forever. But here, 14 years later, we can ask the question, is it still worth it to get one? I hope to answer that question and more for you here today on the first episode of the MCU Review. Let's dive right in with the I/O. First up is digital I/O pins, of which there are 14 on the Arduino UNO. Each pin can be set individually to be either input or output. In input mode, each pin also has an internal pull-up resistor, cutting out the need for external pull-ups. Each pin is limited to 20 milliamps of current in or out, so powering huge loads is probably a bad idea, but it's more than capable of dealing with small things like LEDs. On the analog side, the UNO has 6 analog input pins for reading things like potentiometers. Additionally, 6 of the digital pins, 5, 6, 9, 10, and 11, can be used as a PWM output indicated by the tilde next to their number and allow for things like controlling the brightness of an LED. Additionally, while not called out on the board, pin 2 and 3 also have the additional functionality of allowing for interrupts. The interrupts allow for stopping code execution temporarily and immediately executing some other code. Examples of its use cases are things like rotary encoders, where every pulse of a potentially quick input needs to be captured for things to work correctly. Additionally, the UNO provides interfaces for 3 common communication protocols: I2C, also called TWI, SPI, and UART. I2C is available on pins A4 and A5, with the clock line being on A4 and the data on A5. SPI sees clock on pin 13, controller in peripheral out on pin 12, controller out peripheral in on pin 11, and chip select being on pin 10. These interfaces are usually used to communicate with various sensors, but both can also be used for communication between a number of UNOs or other microcontrollers. The last communication interface, UART, is a bit more difficult to use in projects, as it is what is used to program the chip and is also what is used by the serial monitor to allow for reading/writing text data to and from the Arduino. It can be accessed on pins 0 and 1 of the UNO, but in order to program the board, anything that could cause interference on those pins must be disconnected. Once programming is complete, they can be used normally, but are still shared with the serial monitor, so any data sent to the serial output will also be sent to any other connected devices. All in all, there's a huge amount of I/O available on the UNO that is more than enough for most projects. As this is the first episode, it sits at the top of the leaderboard for I/O. The next thing to discuss is speed. The UNO uses the ATmega 328P and an external oscillator to allow it to run at 16 MHz or 16 million cycles per second. That sounds pretty fast, but to keep it in perspective, the CPU in your computer or phone probably runs closer to somewhere around 2 billion cycles per second. In order to compare the speed of the UNO and other MCUs moving forward, I found an Arduino Sketch version of the CoreMark benchmark. This benchmark tests several aspects of computing, including lists, matrix processing, and state machine processing. The result is one number that can be used to compare real-world performance. Unfortunately, it seems that the UNO does not have enough RAM to run it. Luckily, an alternative but not quite as thorough test called Drystone does work. I'll be using both results for future comparison, but for now, the Arduino takes the top spot for both. Now, what was I going to talk about next? Oh right, memory. There are 3 main types of memory that can be compared: SRAM, flash memory, and non-volatile storage. Each has a different use, and depending on your needs, you will need more of one or another. You can think of SRAM, or static random access memory, as the memory that stores the variables of your program. If your program needs to store a lot of variables, then you need more SRAM. If you have too many variables saved, then you can end up running out of RAM and crashing your program. The next kind of memory to talk about is flash memory. This is the memory that actually stores your program on the UNO. The UNO has 32 kilobytes of flash memory, which will require a fairly large program to use up completely. The data for the flash memory is uploaded to the UNO from your computer, and once it's set, you cannot access it from your program. The last kind of memory is the NVS, or non-volatile storage. The memory can be set and read from your program, and has the added benefit of retaining its data even when the device is powered off and on. This means that you can store data that you don't want to be lost due to power failure. The UNO only has 1 kilobyte of NVS in the form of an internal EEPROM. Once again, with this being the only board on the board, the Arduino tops the charts for memory. The last thing that needs to be talked about is the thing special and unique to each microcontroller. I'm calling this the board bonus. The UNO does not have a lot of fancy bells and whistles, but I think it has two major board bonuses that make it much more than just what the hardware can do. The first is the form factor. With it being meant as a learning platform, each pin is broken out with a female header and excellent markings on the silkscreen of the board. This combination makes it super easy to hook up your first circuit and even allows for creating some simple circuits without the need for a breadboard or even additional wires. The second board bonus is the huge resource of past projects and tutorials that exist for the UNO. Almost any sensor and display you can imagine that can be used with the UNO has been, and examples, if not entire libraries dedicated to them, abound. Most are open source, and this huge number of code examples means that you can very easily learn by doing and get up to speed quickly. The last thing to discuss is price. This may be a contentious topic, as there are really two kinds of UNOs that you can get. The first is the official Arduino UNO, directly from Arduino themselves. This is the most expensive option, but it's not for no reason. The cost does not just cover the hardware itself, but also the continued development and support of the Arduino IDE, board development, and feature support that the Arduino company does. The other factor in this price is quality of components and manufacturing. There are counterfeits of all major ICs, as well as cheap and lower quality passive components like resistors and capacitors. These components can have all sorts of issues that can result in strange and hard to track down errors. The second option for UNOs are clones. These boards can vary widely on the components used and the construction quality. For the most part, they will work the same as a real UNO, but there are no guarantees. However, with them sometimes being up to 1/5 of the price, it's tempting to take the risk, especially if you need multiple boards. With everything laid out, it's time to answer the question, is the Arduino UNO worth it in 2024? My answer? Absolutely. If you are new to microcontrollers, their ease of use and huge number of resources online for learning make them a no-brainer. And even if you are a more advanced user, their form factor and exposed pins make them perfect for setting up a quick test circuit. I think anyone who wants to get into hobby electronics should have at least one UNO, whether that be a clone or the genuine article. I'll have affiliate links down below in the description if you want to purchase one and help support my channel. Speaking of support, if you like this video, a like is always helpful and a subscribe will make sure you don't miss the next one. If you want to take your support even further, I have a Patreon with benefits like access to my Discord at any level and a monthly sticker for those who pledge more. Right now, I want to thank Kim, Pam, Christian, Joshua, Marcelino, and Ryan for their continued support. That's all I have this time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time here on Make It for Less.